Groovy, baby! Welcome back to a time when peace signs were everywhere, bell-bottoms were the height of fashion, and the English language was getting a serious makeover. The 1960s weren't just about social revolution, civil rights, and moon landings. They were also about how young baby boomers completely transformed the way Americans spoke. Today, we're taking a trip down memory lane to explore 10 phrases that defined the boomer generation in the swinging 60s. Some of these expressions are still hanging around today, while others have gone the way of the dinosaur. But each one tells a story about a decade that changed everything. So put on your go-go boots, tune in, and drop out of your normal routine for the next 15 minutes. Let's get started. Our first phrase is one you've probably heard before, even if you weren't around in the 60s. Far out. Far out was the Swiss Army knife of 1960s slang. It could mean anything from amazing to bizarre to mind-blowing. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in 1969, you can bet millions of boomers watching on their TVs were saying, "Far out." The phrase emerged from the jazz scene of the 1950s, but really exploded in popularity during the psychedelic era of the mid to late 60s. It perfectly captured the spirit of a generation that was exploring consciousness, questioning authority, and pushing boundaries. You might say something like, "Did you see Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock? That guitar solo was far out." Or if your friend showed up wearing a tie-dye shirt with fringe and love beads, you'd say, "Far out threads, man." The beauty of far out was its versatility. It worked for everything from describing an acid trip to praising a particularly good sandwich. Today, we might say, awesome or incredible. But back then, if something blew your mind, it was simply far out. Fun fact, the phrase actually came from jazz musicians who used far out to describe music that was experimental or ahead of its time. The hippies just ran with it and made it mainstream. If far out was the all-purpose exclamation, then groovy was its cooler, more sophisticated cousin. Wait, wrong decade. Austin Powers may have brought it back in the 90s, but groovy was born in the 1960s, emerging from the dance floors and music scenes of the era. Groovy literally came from being in the groove, a musical term meaning you're in sync with the rhythm. But by the mid-60s, it had evolved to mean anything excellent, fashionable, or pleasing. If something was groovy, it was cool, it was hip, it was happening. Picture this, you're at a basement party in 1967. The Rolling Stones are playing on the record player. Your friend walks in wearing a miniskirt and white go-go boots. You'd say, "Those boots are groovy." She might respond, "Thanks. Got them on Carnaby Street. Pretty groovy scene there." What made groovy special was its positive, laid-back vibe. It wasn't just about being cool, it was about being in harmony with the moment. It embodied the peace and love philosophy that defined hippie culture. By 1969, groovy was everywhere. You could have a groovy party, wear groovy clothes, listen to groovy music, or meet a groovy person. It was the ultimate seal of approval from the counterculture generation. Interesting note, some people used groovy and far out interchangeably, but purists would tell you there was a subtle difference. Far out was more about being amazed or blown away, while groovy was about being pleasantly satisfied and in tune. Now we're getting into the political side of 60s slang with right on. Right on started as a way to show agreement or approval, but by the late 60s, it had become a rallying cry for activists, protesters, and anyone fighting for social change. This phrase came straight from the Black Power movement and the civil rights struggle. When someone made a powerful point at a rally or spoke truth to power, the crowd would respond with, "Right on." It meant, "You're absolutely correct," or "I stand with you." Imagine you're at a protest in 1968. Someone gives a speech about ending the Vietnam War or fighting for civil rights. You raise your fist and shout, "Right on, brother!" You're not just agreeing, you're showing solidarity. The phrase crossed over from black activists to the broader counterculture movement. Soon, white hippies, anti-war protesters, and feminists were all using "right on" to express agreement and support. It became a verbal fist bump, a way of saying, "I hear you, I support you, and I'm with you in this struggle." By 1970, you could use "right on" for anything from political statements to everyday agreements. Your roommate suggests ordering pizza? Right on. Someone says Nixon should resign? Right on, man. What's fascinating about "right on" is how it carried weight. It wasn't just casual agreement, it had an element of conviction and commitment. When you said, "right on," you were taking a stand. Legacy. This phrase has actually survived quite well. You still hear it today, especially in communities that remember its activist roots. It's a living connection to the social movements of the 1960s. Here's a phrase that sounds strange to modern ears. Can you dig it? No shovels required. Can you dig it? Was the 1960s way of asking, "Do you understand?" Or, "Are you following me?" But it was so much more than that. It was also asking, "Do you appreciate this?" Or, "Are you hip to what's happening?" The word dig, in this context, came from African American jazz slang in the 1940s. It meant to understand or appreciate something deeply. By the 60s, it had spread to the mainstream youth culture. You'd use it like this: your friend is explaining why Bob Dylan going electric at Newport Folk Festival was actually revolutionary. After their passionate explanation, they'd ask, "Can you dig it?" They're asking if you truly understand the significance. Or maybe you're showing off your new lava lamp. You'd say to your visitors, "Check out this lamp, can you dig it?" You're asking if they appreciate how cool it is. The phrase had a philosophical dimension too. To dig something meant you got it on a deeper level. It wasn't just intellectual understanding, it was an emotional and spiritual connection. Very 60s. "Can you dig it?" could also be rhetorical. A speaker at a BN might say, "We need to spread love, not war, can you dig it?" They're not really asking, they're emphasizing their point and rallying the crowd. This phrase showed up in music constantly. Jazz musicians, R&B singers, and rock bands all used it in lyrics and performances. From the beaches of California comes our next phrase. Hang loose. Hang loose was the unofficial motto of surf culture, and since surf culture was huge in the 60s, thanks to the Beach Boys, surf movies, and the California Dream, the phrase spread like wildfire. To hang loose meant to relax, take it easy, don't stress. It embodied the laid-back, go-with-the-flow attitude that both surfers and hippies embraced. In a decade of tension, the Cold War, Vietnam, political assassinations, hang loose was a reminder to not let the chaos consume you. The phrase came with its own hand gesture, the shaka sign. You'd extend your thumb and pinky while folding down your 3 middle fingers. That was the physical embodiment of hanging loose. Picture this scenario. It's 1966, and you're heading to the beach with friends. Your buddy is worried about a test next week. You'd tell him, "Hey man, hang loose. The test is days away. Let's catch some waves and deal with it later." Or maybe someone's getting worked up about something trivial. You'd say, "Hang loose, brother. It's not worth the bad vibes." What made Hang Loose special was its philosophy. It wasn't just about being lazy or irresponsible. It was about maintaining your cool, not sweating the small stuff, and keeping your mental equilibrium in a chaotic world. Very Buddhist, actually, though most people using it probably didn't know that. While Hang Loose started with surfers, it quickly became part of general hippie vocabulary. You didn't need to own a surfboard to tell someone to hang loose. Today we might say, chill out, or take it easy, but neither quite captures the philosophical cool of hang loose. Here's a phrase that took everyday words and flipped their meaning completely. Out of sight. You might think out of sight would mean something invisible or missing, but in 60s slang, it meant something was so amazing, so incredible, it transcended normal experience. It was beyond what your eyes could see. It was metaphysically awesome. This phrase emerged from African American vernacular in the late 50s and hit mainstream youth culture in the mid-60s. It was everywhere by 1967, the summer of love. Let's say you just heard the Doors perform Light My Fire live for the first time. Your mind is blown. You'd turn to your friend and say, "Man, that was out of sight." You're saying it was beyond amazing, it transcended normal experience. Or imagine someone shows you their new motorcycle, a classic chopper with custom paint. "That bike is out of sight," you'd exclaim. It's not just cool, it's extraordinarily cool. The phrase had a psychedelic quality to it, which made it perfect for the era. Everything was about expanding consciousness and going beyond normal perception. If something was out of sight, it took you beyond the mundane reality into something extraordinary. While far out, expressed amazement, out of sight, expressed amazement mixed with admiration. It was enthusiastic approval of the highest order. You'd hear it constantly at concerts, parties, and gatherings. Woodstock was probably described as out of sight about 10 million times over that weekend in August 1969. Often shortened to just out of sight, or even more casually, out sight. The faster and more excited you said it, the more genuine your enthusiasm seemed. Not all 60s slang was positive. Some phrases expressed rebellion and resistance. Enter the man. The man was boomer shorthand for authority, oppression, and the establishment. It could refer to the police, the government, your boss, your parents, or anyone in a position of power who was, in your view, trying to keep you down or control your life. This phrase had deep roots in African American communities, where it referred to white authority figures and systemic racism. In the 60s, the counterculture adopted it to describe any oppressive authority. Usage examples. The man is trying to draft us for Vietnam. The man doesn't want us to wear our hair long. Don't trust the man, he's just trying to keep us in line. If a police officer broke up your peaceful protest, he was the man. If your university administration banned rock concerts on campus, they were the man. If the government censored certain books or music, that was the man trying to control your mind. What made the man powerful was its ambiguity. It could be specific or general. It was both everyone in authority and no one in particular. It represented the entire system that young boomers felt was repressive, outdated, and unjust. You'd hear it in activist speeches. "We've got to fight the man," or "Don't let the man tell you how to live." It became a shorthand for rebellion against any form of authority or convention. Ironically, the phrase, "stick it to the man," meant to rebel or get revenge on authority. So while the man was bad, sticking it to him was very, very good. This phrase reflected the deep generational divide of the 60s. Young boomers felt their parents' generation, the man, just didn't understand them and was trying to suppress their freedom and individuality. Perhaps the most famous phrase of the entire decade didn't come from the street. It came from Timothy Leary, the Harvard psychologist turned psychedelic guru. "Turn on, tune in, drop out." Leary coined this phrase in 1966 as a mantra for the psychedelic movement, and it became the unofficial slogan of the counterculture. Let's break it down. Turn on meant activate your neural and genetic equipment, essentially, expand your consciousness, often through psychedelic drugs like LSD. Tune in meant interact harmoniously with the world around you, become sensitive to the deeper meanings and connections. Drop out meant detach from the conventional game of society and discover your own path. Young boomers latched onto this phrase like it was gospel. It gave philosophical weight to their desire to reject conventional paths. Why become a corporate drone when you could drop out and find yourself? Why live in your parents' boring suburban world when you could tune into higher consciousness? This phrase appeared on posters, in underground newspapers, in songs, and in countless dorm room debates. It justified everything from taking acid to quitting college to living in a commune. Critics, of course, said it was just an excuse for laziness and drug use. Supporters said it was a call for spiritual awakening and social transformation. Most boomers didn't actually drop out permanently. They might have taken a gap year, experimented for a while, then eventually rejoined mainstream society. But for a moment there, turn on, tune in, drop out, represented the ultimate rebellion. This phrase became so associated with the 60s that you can't tell the story of the decade without mentioning it. As we near the end of our journey, let's talk about the simplest and perhaps most enduring phrase of the 60s. Peace. Peace wasn't just a greeting or farewell in the 1960s, it was a philosophy, a movement, and a generation's desperate hope for a better world. While the phrase, peace out, wouldn't become common until the 1980s and 90s, boomers in the 60s simply said peace when leaving or as a general greeting. Hold up two fingers in AV, the peace sign, and say, peace, brother, or peace, sister. This was more than just saying goodbye. You were wishing the other person actual peace, invoking the hope that maybe, just maybe, if enough people spread peace, the world would become more peaceful. In an era defined by the Vietnam War, civil rights violence, and nuclear anxiety, peace was both a greeting and a prayer. Anti-war protesters would flash the peace sign to police. Hippies would greet each other with peace and love. Concertgoers would hold up their fingers and sway to the music. What made peace powerful was its simplicity. You didn't need to speak English to understand a peace sign. It transcended language, culture, and national borders. It was a universal symbol that said, I'm not your enemy. Let's choose understanding over conflict. Unlike many phrases on this list, peace has survived. People still use it today, still flash the peace sign. That's the power of a good idea. It outlasts the decade that created it. Let's end with a phrase that showed the playful side of 60s slang. Sock it to me. Made famous by the TV show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, which debuted in 1968. Sock it to me meant, give it to me straight, or lay it on me, or simply, tell me more. It had a flirtatious, playful energy. The phrase actually originated in African American music and culture, particularly in R&B and soul music. Aretha Franklin's 1967 hit, Respect, featured the line, sock it to me, and the phrase exploded into mainstream consciousness. On Laugh-In, various celebrities would pop up and say, sock it to me, before getting drenched with water or hit with something. It became a national catchphrase. Even presidential candidate Richard Nixon appeared on the show and said it, trying to seem hip and with it to young voters. You could use it like, I heard you went on a wild date last night, sock it to me. Tell me everything. Or, you've got some gossip? Come on, sock it to me. It was fun, energetic, and captured the playful, irreverent spirit of the late 60s. While the decade had its serious, heavy moments, phrases like, sock it to me, reminded everyone that rebellion could also be joyful. And there you have it. 10 phrases that defined how baby boomers spoke in the 1960s. From far out to sock it to me, these expressions captured a generation's hopes, rebellions, philosophies, and sense of fun. Some of these phrases have survived into the 21st century. Others are relics, remembered only in movies and history books. but each one tells us something about a decade that transformed American culture. So the next time you hear someone say, groovy, ironically, or flash a peace sign, remember, these weren't just silly slang terms. They were the language of a generation that believed they could change the world. Can you dig it? Far out. Peace.